Hello, my name is Nicholas Lindner, and this is my project and paper on compounding algorithmic bias, privacy failures, and data insecurity across the criminal justice pipeline. My motivation for this project stems from a class I took. It was like around 2 years ago. It was like an AI ethics class for my machine learning certificate, and basically there was a section on disparate impact and predictive policing and such. And I figured I could apply this concept to security because a lot of technologies, especially these that are used by the criminal justice system, are built without transparency or oversight. And they don't really have necessarily the best protection behind them either. So, um, so yeah, I figured I could extrapolate that idea to privacy and security. And this is what I found. So the methodology, obviously started with collecting peer-reviewed studies from big papers and journals. And then I categorized them into pipeline stages. The main one that I focused on was the pipeline from predictive policing to risk assessment once, someone has been detained, and then their biometric systems. Um, and then I basically ended up analyzing each stage for technical issues like encryption failures, weak logging, too broad data sharing and such. Um, and I analyzed this stuff, compared it to different data, like how they affect different things across agencies, uh, their exposure to sensitive identifiers, etc., and then combine these findings eventually to show how they compound across the justice pipeline. So, as for my results, I found that early vulnerabilities rarely go away, and in fact, they end up compounding most of the time. So, predictive policing systems have a history of insecure APIs and unencrypted data sets, and then risk assessment tools often centralize sensitive data but lack proper access controls or audit logs. And once data starts moving across agencies, the attack surface, expands basically pretty drastically. And even though these agencies don't share a common security standard, this is actually, not necessarily a good thing either. Uh, since they're connected but not sharing security standards, there may be ways for someone to, use one agency to get information from another by breaking into their system. That's just one example, but across the studies that I've looked at, the pattern is pretty clear that weaknesses from early stages persist and usually compound and grow larger into larger exposures and risks. So here, for example, you can see that 73% of systems met proper encryption, but still around 27 used weak or incomplete encryption, which is a very significant amount. For biometrics specifically, that's a huge risk because, uh, you know, a face or fingerprint can't really be reset if compromised. Um, And then here you can see that vulnerability rates vary by stage, but predictive policing and risk tools already show substantial weakness. But the biggest jump, it appears to be like across agency sharing, which, as I said earlier, is very risky. And if we go to here, you can see how it like builds upon each other, this cumulative exposure curve. We can see that as we look at these stages together, basically, the cumulative exposure curve shows you what's really happening, and that each stage adds its own vulnerabilities, and overall, the risk increases. And by the final stage, there's a much higher exposure level, than earlier on because of this compounding effect. And overall, the main takeaway is that security weaknesses don't stay isolated. They actually compound as data moves through the justice system. And specifically, cross-agency sharing amplifies the problem because every connected system introduces new vulnerabilities that can be, you know, built upon other older vulnerabilities, and it creates pretty big mess if not handled correctly. And most importantly, improving security in just one stage isn't enough. You need to strengthen the entire pipeline end to end in one unified way to fix the problem. So thank you very much.